I'm going to tell y'all right now, all of these wonderful people would not be here without Patreon supporters like you. If you enjoy credible news, reviews, and commentary on UFOs and UAPs 5 days a week, you want to support this show. What's your name? Marty. Marty, look how easy this is, Marty. Pick up your phone. Boom! You're a Patreon member. I mean, look, it's so easy. You just click the link, which is right here. Just for $1 a month, you can support this show. Just fill out the information and pledge what's comfortable for you. It could be $1, $5, $10, or who knows. Just support.
Hello, and welcome to the Unidentified Celebrity Review. It's Thanksgiving week here in America, and I think this community has a lot to be thankful for. You know, we may not have gotten the leaked videos, photos, and raw data that we're all yearning for, but things that seemed unimaginable just 5 years ago are coming to fruition. Our government is extremely close to passing legislation creating an office to investigate and resolve anomalous phenomena. And if you don't trust the government to give us the goods, we have the world's top scientists coming together to raise funds and search our atmosphere for signs of unknown life. Jamarl Thomas will be joining us in a bit to discuss just how far we are progressing. And I'm thankful for that. I'm also thankful to see all the familiar names here in the live chat. Hey there, Akasi Chris, Ryan Spray, Meat Cutter. Really great to see you all. And of course, a huge thanks as well to Tina, Aaron, Meat Cutter, Doyle, John, and the rest of the moderator team who help keep things in the live chat and Discord welcoming and civil. You mean a lot to us. And, not all of us have the same opinions on this subject. If we did, there'd be nothing to discuss. And I really think that's what makes this community so special. So let's get on with today's discussion. I'm Rather Be Squidding. Let's welcome the rest of our hosts, Luis Jimenez and UFO Jane.
Hello, Jane.
How is everybody?
Good. How are you feeling? Are you feeling better?
I think I'm free from the coughing fit.
Yeah, you look better.
I probably will mute myself occasionally, but
that's okay.
Yeah, I feel fantastic.
Well, I'm glad
I can't wait to eat everything.
Okay, I was going to say, I thought you were going to say, I can't wait to eat Jamarl Thomas. That's what I thought you were going. I was like, wait,
No,
what just happened? This show just took a crazy turn. All right, hello, good morning, good evening, good day, good afternoon, and aloha. Welcome back to another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review, your home for credible news, reviews, and commentary on everything UAP, UFO, science, emerging tech, and futurism. My name's Luis Jimenez. That is Rather Be Squidding. And again, Jane, Kyle, aka UFO Jane. We've been asked. We've asked her, how do you prefer? She says UFO Jane. But for some reason, I always throw your real name in there. So
either way, Kyle's fine. It's all good.
Kyle's fine, right? It actually works. It's not like it's false information. It's not fake news. But anyway, let's continue. We got some bills to pay before we get started. Of course, I want to say thank you to Das Tapes. They provide all of the tunes that you hear on the show. Their Bandcamp link is in the description below. Want to remind you, we have the podcast, which is available pretty shortly after every show airs. It's available on iTunes, Spotify. Please do us a favor. Rate and review goes a very, very long way. The podcast is growing by leaps and bounds. It's really fun to see. So do us a favor, rate and review. It helps out a lot. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this channel. We are so close to 5,000 subs. I think we're about 70 away. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, share the show. It's a great way to support, especially if you can't do it through Super Chats or if you can't do it through Patreon or you can't support financially, which is totally cool. The show's free anyway. You don't have to do those things to get access to the show. They help, of course. We are a public access channel. We're supported by viewers like you. So if you can do that, awesome. If you can't, share the show. It goes a very, very, very long way. Rather mentioned it earlier. We do have a Discord where sometimes people from the show, guests pop in. The conversations that are being had in the Discord are a lot of fun. So go check out the Discord. The link is in the description below. The link for every single one of our co-hosts and also our guests are available below. So if you like the Musings of a Jamarl Thomas. His link is right below. His work is phenomenal. He's one of my favorite thinkers on this topic. So let's bring him on without further ado. Friend of the show, Mr. Jamarl Thomas from
What's going on, my man?
Soapbox. How you doing, brother?
So far, so good. Can't complain. How you guys doing?
Can't complain, right? Well, we're doing great, man. We're talking about UFO legislation and law. So how bad can things be, right?
I know, right?
I mean, there are some wild things going on in the world, and I know I've been watching your work closely the last few weeks, and I've really been enjoying your coverage of everything that's going on. It's an interesting time we're living in historically, and if I sometimes look at you and when you're working and I'm like, he needs a break. Jamarl needs to come on and talk about some UFOs to forget all about this real world stuff happening. So dude, I'm so happy you're here. Here's where I wanted to start with you, because I thought this was just one of the coolest, most interesting things that I don't think people are really noticing. Mm-hmm. And that is Senator Gillibrand. As you know, she put in an amendment that's been co-sponsored by 5 senators in regards to UAP collection, creating a permanent office, a bill with actual teeth that holds some of these intelligence communities' feet to the fire, especially when it comes to budgets for the following year, which is a good thing. But the thing I wanted to start with, and I just wanted to get your view on, was this right here. And I'm going to blow this up so everyone can see it. This is Senator Gillibrand's Twitter page.
Okay.
And so you'll see here, she's got a couple of tweets here in the last, today. She tweeted, I think, 3 or 4 times, where she's talking about, things impacted by Hurricane Ida, real world things, right? Visiting parts of her neighborhood, doing, volunteer work, talking about the Build Back Better coalition, all of this stuff. And then we get down to a tweet that she had this weekend. And right. It's about this UAP article, and it's an article that quotes her, that she had an interview, so to speak, with with Brian Bender for Politico magazine. This single tweet, I don't know if you all see this, but I'm going to zoom it in even more, had 2.3 thousand likes and 841 retweets with people commenting on it 295 times. I went through the comments. 95 to 98% of them are positive.
And UFO Twitter showed up.
UFO Twitter showed up big time on this post.
I was worried, I wonder if she's going to get hated on, because it's not like, I'm sure her followers are used to seeing tweets about UFOs. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure that was I'm sure that was nice of her. I'm sure she felt good seeing all the positive feedback.
Well, here's my point, and this is why I'm bringing it up, because when you go to other tweets, you got 9 likes, 2 retweets, 71 likes, 34 retweets, and it struck me like a bolt of lightning. Oh, this might be politically viable. This could be possibly a platform to use for either a rerun of your office and or possibly
how many
president.
Followers she got.
Yeah, I'm sure she didn't lose any followers because of it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I am curious, Jamarl, is that a just absolute batshit crazy statement that I just said?
No, I don't think it's crazy.
Do you see this is possible?
So I don't think it's crazy, but I do think it's a feather in the cap, if that makes sense. I mean, because like I said, I don't understand how the Director of National Intelligence could come out with a preliminary report that basically says it's real. We don't think it's us. It's in our skies. We got to get rid of the giggle factor, etc. You have Gallego write another amendment that goes further for the UAP task force, basically expanding it. She puts out an amendment basically going further than that. And yeah, it's a bipartisan issue. I mean, she's been able to get Democrats and Republicans. I think Lindsey Graham is on it, Marco Rubio. So this is not like, the rims of the various parties. Gillibrand is a Democrat's Democrat, just like, what's his name? Lindsey Graham is a Republican's Republican. Right. Like, there's no doubt that this guy's a Republican. There's no doubt that she's a Democrat. And yet they could stand arm in arm on this and kind of push for it. And so she hasn't said we're being invaded. She hasn't gone there. She hasn't said, oh my God, they're aliens. She hasn't gone there. Her basic argument is, look, whether it's us or not us, both of those things are profound and we need to know what it is, especially if it's us. Because her basic point is those could be drones. Those could be from another country that's spoofing alien technology, just kind of living under that notion of alien technology. But it also could be something else that's not us. And we should still know that in order to understand capability, in order to understand propulsion. I mean, in her bill, she has a few interesting things in her proposal that wasn't anywhere near in the other proposal, because her proposal almost assumes that it's not us. So in some of this research, it's like to ascertain the physics associated with it, to ascertain propulsion, even our own science, and informing our own science in regards to the stuff that we don't currently know. Well, how can you be against that? How can you be against that? I mean, in my head, in the way it works is, I don't think she can come out and say they're aliens. I do think she can come out and say, we need to investigate to see what it is. There's a huge question that's afoot, and we need to get to the bottom of the question. I think that's perfectly politically safe and looks good.
Do you see this as a point? Do you see this being debated, especially from let's say the Republican debates that'll be coming up?
Yeah. Well, it depends on what you mean by debated. Like debated in what sense? Like
debated in the sense of it just being brought up during a Republican national debate. You know, the idea of talking about this from a security perspective, because when Christopher Mellon was on Max Moskovich's show, and he's here, by the way, shout out to him. Shout out to Christina Gomez for the $5 dono. Thank you, my lady. We absolutely love you. She says big love to the awesome crew. Christopher Mellon said over the weekend in a really cool interview that he sat down with both Avi Loeb and Lou Elizondo.
Yeah.
When I asked Max, hey, can you ask him about the big phone home and see if that helps? Like, are we helping? Is this moving the ball? And his answer was yes, but the thing that absolutely was moving the ball, obviously, and I've said this from the start, and I'm not asking that to get credit. I'm asking it to make sure the message that we have from these events is actually cutting to the bone and maybe moving the ball downfield. But it's also his response was it's helping, but the thing that really sort of got this amendment into the lexicon and now on a bill is the fact that they've been talking about this obviously since 2017. They've been bringing pilots and high-level military officials into the senator's office. The senators have been briefed on the information, and it's a national security issue is the reason why they're ramping up this discussion. So I could see, especially in a Republican debate, how a national security issue could be brought up. I think the way it would probably be put on the table as a question would be, you know, Senator Rubio, in 2021, you supported the NDAA, which had an amendment in there wanting to track and study UAPs and UFOs. Do you think that's a waste of money? Do you regret, you know, sort of voting on that and then maybe getting an answer in that realm? That's how I kind of envision it. I don't envision it as a let's have a discussion and 15-minute debate about UFOs. So I'm curious to know, like, how do you see that going down if it went down?
I think you're thinking too little of the subject matter. Like, because
really?
that's an insecure question, if that makes sense. It's like, is this a trash issue or not, Rubio? And I don't think they'll come at it that way. Like, I don't think
it's mainstream media.
Yeah,
you know, like I think.
Look, on mainstream media, Elizondo was on mainstream media. She asked him, hey, so you think we're being visited? He says, yes. My scientific research, yes. Look at Tucker Carlson. Look at even The Hill and some of these other news outlets. They've all run the story and run it straight. I mean, even when you're looking at 60 Minutes and the pilots and stuff that they've had on television, I think the skeptic point of view is the more difficult point of view to make in this case, even from the standpoint of media at this point. I mean, I could totally be wrong, but it seems that there's a sea change in regards to the perspective of, let's say, mainstream and the way mainstream is looking at this issue currently versus to where it was. If this was 15 years ago, yes, 1,000% yes. that question will come up in that very specific way. They did that to, what is his name? He's been, it was
Kucinich.
Thank you. Very good.
Yep.
Yeah. Kucinich. They asked him that on the debate stage
Yeah.
in order to kind of like shame Kucinich. And what did he do? He froze up. He didn't know how to respond to it.
Right. I mean, we talked about this the other day with Jazz. I think that was a moment that killed Kucinich's presidential run.
He looked insane. It didn't look insane. He just looked like he was sweating bullets.
Yeah, well, because it was a personal sighting that he had.
Yeah.
This is a little different. And the reason why I think it might be framed in that way is because if the defense if it gets signed in on January 1st, which means we get the permanent office somewhere around end of June, the 24th specifically, because it's 180 days after it's signed. And then the office needs time. So you're looking at the end of 2023 for this office to really start establishing reports, but we might get one report, and it would probably be a classified report to the members of Congress in these committees that approved this bill, part of the bill. But I'm thinking by 2024, this is election season. That's right. I think for if you have a political opponent, say in the state of Florida or New York, they could use the vote of this bill and pitch it as, you see, this is a waste of money. This is why you shouldn't have this person in here, because there's been nothing of substance released by this office.
Oh,
and
man.
Because we're talking about this office might get somewhere in the realm of $800 to $2 to $3 billion for a couple of years of funding. I mean, it's a real budget. So that's my fear. But if you're gonna quell those fears, please do.
I don't believe it. I just don't buy it. I mean, because you're stuck with somewhat of a logical problem in all of this. So the Department of Defense gets nearly $800 billion a year, and that's just in the money that we basically know that they're getting out of it. And supposedly the most advanced tech around the world and everything else. I mean, in fact, from the standpoint of the way the world looks at technology and looks at the U.S. military prowess, they couldn't even fathom this not being the U.S. Meaning, because the first question came up, how can that be Russia and China? Meaning it was even off the table on some level that China and Russia could have that level of technology to basically leapfrog the U.S. So that's kind of where people are in their thoughts about why they don't necessarily think it's somebody else per se. From the standpoint of your military, though, if you're spending nearly $1 trillion, let's say $800 billion a year in regards to military, and you find out there's something that's invading our military space that has human effects in regards to the way it engages people. We have apparently video of it. It's showing up on our military vessels. The Navy changes their protocols for it. You have the Department of National Intelligence releases this huge report. You have the various members who are either in the military or who are in those organizations going on, talking to reporters across the entire media spectrum, meaning what the CNN, Washington Post, New York Times, the works. I think it's just fundamentally changed. I don't think you can say something is invading our military space. We don't believe it's Russia. We don't believe it's China. We believe this piece of technology. We believe it's some kind of craft or something is blowing our craft away. However, we're not curious about what it is. Meaning, even if you want to say something is invading our airspace, you can't necessarily say it's not anything. You can't go with the swamp gas argument anymore. So whether you're media or whether you're, let's say, another political actor, you have to at the very least accept what's the center ground at this point, which is there's something out there. It's a real thing. It's a there to this particular issue.
By the way, I've stolen that from you. There's
the there.
I've used that everywhere. That, by the way, that originated with Jamarl. What was that, Jane? Sorry.
I didn't know it originated with Jamarl.
Oh yeah, that absolutely originated with Jamarl. I don't want to take credit for this man's wisdom.
But I guess that's my point. I mean, from this standpoint, the media has basically accepted, yes, there's a there to it. Now, they wouldn't say it's aliens, but at this point, you have Rubio, Gallego, Lindsey Graham, you have, what's his name? The one from heading up NASA, you have Elizondo, you have all of these mainstream politicians, Mitt Romney, basically saying, we saw the videos. Many of these people are with the Armed Services Committee and everything else. We saw the videos. We've been briefed behind the scenes. There's something invading our airspace. That's why I don't believe that you can take legitimately the position of, okay, is this a waste funding this project? Because at this point, it's why would it be a waste? It's something as a question mark that we don't necessarily know what it is. And at the moment where the mainstream media and the political space basically says, okay, there's a there. That's a real thing. Well, you have to answer that. That's a massive question. Right. And so I honestly, if the question is asked, I don't think it would be asked that way. I think it'll be asked in the opposite way. I think it would be, hey, we spend nearly $1 trillion on our military every year. There's something invading our airspace. We have no idea what it is. Apparently, there are human effects that are associated with it. We had pilots and everything else. Shouldn't you give a comment on this? And if you went to Congress, will you also dedicate yourself to figuring out what this issue is? Meaning, I don't think it would be a mainstay from the standpoint of this is a centerpiece of my campaign. Mm-hmm. I think it would be a feather in their cap in regards to a bipartisan support for it, where people would applaud you going after it, if that makes sense. Meaning, it doesn't hurt you, especially from the argument standpoint of, look, there's something there. It is our job to know what it is. Meaning, especially if it's going to breach our nuclear facilities and everything else. That stuff, like the argument on some level makes itself. I don't believe that the media is going to ask that question. Like for yourself, if you think back to any time recently where they've asked the question in that specific way, like think of 60 Minutes, think of 2020, think of all of these articles that took place, Popular Mechanics. That's not the language that they're using, and that's not the framing. The framing is there's something there, we don't know what it is, we need to investigate.
Yeah, and with that framing, it seems pretty dissent-proof, right? Like everyone's going to be on board. Lou, I think, does have a point though. Like, what happens if 5, 10 years down the line, we've funded this thing, billions of dollars has gone in it, and the public reports are just we still can't figure it out. How long does this kind of bipartisan agreement go on if there are no results?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a very good question. I have no idea. I mean, part of me thinks that's a good question. I mean, if they start doing research where they're getting actual data, but I guess you're postulating, okay, what if they don't get anything? And it's still
we can't figure it out. Yeah.
I mean, it depends, I guess. If they still believe that it's something, but they don't know what it is, then nothing really changed, if that makes sense. You may get the public waning in regards to its interest, but the moment they find anything, the public's interest is going to be right back. I think the issue stays bipartisan for as long as it's a question mark. I mean, the moment that's no longer a question mark, and the moment that you get, I don't know, some kind of technology or something else around it, the politics of it changes on some level. But at this point, because it's a nothing, even though they know it's a something, it's just this kind of, everybody's going to back this notion of what's going through our airspace. Of course, we're going to back it because we should know what's invading our airspace.
Should we hope then that it stays just there's there? We don't know.
You don't want that, do you? That would be painful.
What happens when the politics? Like, what happens when we do? Because isn't one of the reasons, right, that this can get bipartisan support and we're all behind it is because it's just an open-ended scientific question. Once there is data, right, and answers, and there's beliefs, won't it start to get political? Like, do you worry this is all just too good to be true right now?
No, because I don't think it's too good to be. But no, I'm more worried about it, to be honest. In any situation where you're going to have some kind of disclosure or even a soft disclosure, there's always going to be the point where it transitions into normality. Like the way we operate now, we don't know as a flat fact in the same way that we know, lungs to air or lungs to oxygen, what it is. Well, we walk around with it in the way that we would pay for something $1 and, have the weight of $1. We get it on some kind of instinctual level. It's not there yet. But at some point, it would always have to transition into normality. It's like today it's not. Today it's a question mark. Today we don't know what the number in the box is. And then in 20 years, it's no longer a question mark. It's a thing. We know it's a thing. We even have some understanding of what they are, how they're manipulating the elements in the way they're manipulating. It was always going to go there. I mean, because I don't think you would want the situation where there's just a permanent question going in perpetuity where nothing gets resolved. People's interests start to wane a bit. You have something still invading your military airspace that they don't necessarily give you any information about. That would be horrendous. And think about what they may learn and just keep to themselves in some kind of black budget program, stuff that should be, donated to the rest of the world. No, I don't think my concerns go more so into what they use the information for, or like, the weaponization of whatever they come up with. I think all of these guys on some level are hawks. And the concept of being hawks, especially people like Lindsey Graham, is like, what? Somebody's invading our airspace. We need to know what that is.
Right.
I think it's the most natural thing in the world. But no, I don't have this. No, my concern goes into what does the world look like when they really start investigating this? And if you do come up with some kind of propulsion, or you do come up with some kind of weaponry, how does the public deal with this kind of new normal in regards to the way the government arranged themselves in order to accommodate what's basically a world situation? Like, it's not going to be the United States versus some other planet. It's going to be Earth resolving itself to deal with the fact that it's being visited by something else. And it's just that transition period is hazy to me. I don't know what that looks like. That's my biggest concern. Not to mention, this stuff is probably going to be used for weapons either way. Like, under the best case scenario, under the best of terms, what they're going to say is, all right, we have all these reports back showing that there's technology out there that blows ours away. We can't compete with something that is invading our airspace. We need to learn how to compete. We need to learn how to mitigate it. And we need to build our own systems where Earth can credibly defend itself. Which means
they would admit that? Just sorry to cut you off. Do you think
they
would admit that? Yeah.
At some point,
that's a big admission.
Well, if you look at Kirsten Gillibrand's article in her bill, she has it herself saying that they're trying to find right here. It says, It says, in addition to the Rapid Response Organization to be tasked with analysis and data collected by the UAP investigators, a science plan outlined with the amendment will aim to test as practical scientific theories to account for the characteristics and the performance of unidentified aerial phenomena that exceed known state-of-the-art in science and technology, with a focus towards propulsion, materials, weapons, and several other related areas. It's a science plan that will ultimately provide the foundation for potential future investments to replicate any such advanced characteristics or performance. It's in the bill.
Right. It's do you think that will be in the declassified reports, though, or do you think that they might hide all of that learning behind the classified?
It depends on what it is. If it's something that's they consider to be innocuous, like, it may be something that's interesting, but like, oh, we're being visited. They may give you that, but they may not give you how does this thing work in any way that you can practically make a bomb or something like that with it. I mean, so it's going to depend upon where it falls. Does this fall primarily in national security, or does this fall in something that we can give the public that piques the interest, but doesn't really give anything real out, or doesn't give any kind of undermine the credibility of government in the world?
So I have a question related to that, Jamarl, and I'm especially curious because you comment and report on all of this political realm is so complicated to me, and I tune it out a lot, to be honest. But one thing I wonder about are there two audiences to things like the UAP amendment, right? Because you have the intelligence community that has been briefed on this.
Some congressmen.
I don't know how to put that into a question, but like, are we putting things out there and trying to say something to China while we're also saying something to the American people, right? Because we can't give all our cards away, right? Like, what are your thoughts on all that? Like,
so it depends on how the world is going to accommodate the issue. Like, if the world is going to look at this as, okay, this is an issue pertaining to the world, you may get a situation where the governments behind the scenes are working with one another. I mean, that's very possible. I mean, even in Gillibrand's amendment, her thing was, we're going to share this information with our friends around the world, et cetera. And part of me even thinks that the entire reason that they are bringing this out now has to do with what they perceive as falling behind to China. This kind of existential thing where we believe that currently we have the capability of outproducing, either from standpoint of high tech, or gaining some level of advantage in some kind of research. And that maybe in these kind of stovepiped, the way they do information, where they have these guys isolated to such a degree. Well, science doesn't work all that well in isolation. You put one guy in the lab, oftentimes what happens is this guy is showing something that somebody else does research on, that somebody else does experiment on, there's collaboration and everything. What happens when that collaboration thing is decapitated? And if you get to a point where your lead in, let's say, military technology, engineering, AI, et cetera, starts to wane, is it crazy for a government to basically, break glass? And that break glass is, we believe that we can get more of an advantage on this particular issue than the rest of the world. So we're going to put this stuff out there to get at least some level of engineering, technology, and production to keep us in lead. I wouldn't be shocked at all if that was part and parcel to the reason. But it's also foreseeable that these guys may be sharing information. And honestly, even from the standpoint of, even though these nations are competing now, China, Russia, the US, you have all these guys kind of jockeying for position, not to mention India and whatnot. Many of these countries have their own space thing going on. And I would wager that China and Russia, especially during the Soviet Union time, was dealing with their own UFO stuff. They were dealing with their own psi phenomena, their own remote viewers, their own alien stuff. They were always, all of them doing it. And if you look at the scale of China, how big it is, I would be shocked if they didn't have their own program at this point. I don't believe for a moment the US is the only program. I guess the question then becomes, are they working together on this behind the scenes, despite this kind of overt conflict or this competition that we see at a top level? I hope they are, meaning I hope it transcends this kind of pettiness, to one another or to the countries at hand. And they recognize anything that we're dealing with here, we're not dealing with an individual country on another planet. We're dealing with another planet. And that demands a certain amount of, coalition from a planetary point of view in order to go with the best outcome. But who knows? Our world has been weird, to put it mildly. And stuff that you would think they would do, like, hey, we're engaging something that we don't know what it is. This is a huge question mark. We think it's another planet. Maybe we should work together as a planet to deal with the issue. Well, that may make too much sense. And they may just look at it as, how can we get an advantage on this particular issue before everybody else can kind of grab onto it? It's hard to know. It honestly really is hard to know. I do know Gillibrand, though, has made the point of sharing information with our allies. And there's, the Five Eyes. So there are certain countries that the US supposedly always shares their information with. What is it? Australia, the UK, New Zealand. I forget the other ones. But I hope that makes sense. And I hope that answers it. That one is hard to answer because there's no way to know their machinations behind the scenes, like how much they know, how much they're going to reveal, how much they want to get their allies. And even we don't entirely know the direct motivation in them presenting this issue now. They could have presented this issue 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. It's like, why is it special now? And so, I don't know. That's a good question. And I would love to be a fly on the wall to know the answer to it.
Yeah, well, we would all. Avi Loeb has this porch where amazing conversations tend to happen. I told him to live stream the porch and maybe raise some funds for Galileo that way, because the amount of people that come to this man's porch is insane.
By the way, the Galileo project, Kirsten Gillibrand invoked that. When we bought Avi on, I think it was last week or week before last. And we were telling her, we was like, hey, did you realize that in the amendment, she has the Galileo project as one of the private sectors that she's going to be engaging with in government resources? He was like, nobody told me. And I was like, what do you mean nobody told you? She's putting that legislation where she's directly using your group, the Galileo project. And he was just, yeah, that's great. It's like, dude, that's huge. You've made it.
I think it's part, and Max Moskowitz, thank you so much for this $5 donation. Says, Luis, what you and your team have achieved is groundbreaking for disclosure. What is that? OGOF UAP? I don't know what that means. Did I miss a hashtag somewhere? Please, somebody break that down for me. But thank you, Max. You're a sweet dude. We appreciate it. And your interview this weekend was awesome. It was a lot of fun. It was the thing that I had the most fun with this weekend. But I was going to say, I mean, it feels a little bit like Jamarl. They brought on Lou Elizondo and Christopher Mellon, and I think Christopher Mellon had a lot to do with the writing of this bill. You look at his blog post, and then you look at the verbiage of this bill, and it is almost verbatim some of the things that this guy was asking for. And it wouldn't shock me if he put Galileo's name in the ring for this amendment, and then I believe they ended up getting 3 seats, if I'm not mistaken. As far how did the seats work?
2.
I know it's 3.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how the seats work. I just took it as the organizations were going to have a set number of members from each, I don't know, group or something that they wanted representing. So they may have some from NASA, some from Galileo, some from the various branches of government coming together in order to kind of, have that conversation about it. But I don't know the details, the technical details of the way it's going to be put together.
Well, I think because we keep asking why now, and I think the part of it has to be that there's a serious now scientific endeavor to get answers on this. And now that scientific endeavor has kind of teamed up with the guys who know what instrumentation to use.
Yes.
They know where to look. And I think they're going to start collecting data on this that has zero classification, and they don't need the permission of the government to release it. And
Exactly.
I think that's freaking them out a little bit, because now they're going to start losing control of the information. So I think this amendment is partly a mad scramble to legitimize a process and a reporting apparatus so that satisfies the thirst for this topic, because there is an absolute thirst. When you look at Gillibrand's Twitter account, and nothing for the last month that she's tweeted has gotten anywhere near as much attention, retweets, or love, I think somebody within her office is going, hey, you need to talk about this a little more, because people love it.
She
people
should
love it. Yeah.
I mean, she should. It's a big deal. And I like your point. Basically, that the DOD has a certain plan in the way that they want to get this out to the public, and maybe even Congress or whoever's running the ball on this particular thing. And they're concerned that Abe and his group may be releasing things in a way that they can't necessarily control. So the idea of bringing him in on it is kind of like putting him under the umbrella at some level, getting some kind of leverage on it. I'm not sure. I mean, I know for private enterprise, they don't necessarily have to acquiesce to that. So that's going to be up to Avi in regards to what he discloses on his own personal Galileo project, if that makes sense.
Well, he says he's disclosing all of it. There's nothing that's going behind any sort of hidden agenda or private discussion. If the data's there, they're going to share it. They're going to make it public, according to him. What are you going to say, Rather?
You can ask the same thing about the Galileo project, though. Why now, right? They could have done that 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And it boils down to me that, TTSA and, what they did in 2017 seems to be the start of all of this, and, the decreasing of stigma. And
agreed. That in the New York Times article, all that stuff, it created space for these guys to be able to make these amendments, or for them to start the Galileo project and things like that. And so, I agree with you. It does seem like, I mean, I guess the White House stuff also comes in, though, but even getting their hands on the videos. I mean, the Pentagon could have came back and said, those aren't real. That's not us. Right. I mean, these get lied sheets still for a living. I mean, so it wouldn't necessarily kill them that much to be like, that's not ours. We don't know what that is. And then, get a sandwich. They didn't do that, though. It just seems like they were open and willing to put this out there. I mean, even going so far as to change the Navy's protocols. I don't know. Some of this stuff feels like a playbook to me, if that makes sense. I mean, because I don't believe for a moment that they don't know whether it's us or not us, meaning whether it's our tech or not our tech. And just in some of the ways that they're describing this stuff, and these are military guys, they're getting this stuff on video, they're getting this stuff on radar. I don't buy that we don't know what's in Russia's inventory. We don't know what's in China's inventory. We may not know everything, but I don't buy that something this exotic will be people just completely unaware of it. And they were like, sure, that's ours. We don't want to say anything about it. Or we believe that's Russia and China, but we don't want to say anything about it. I don't entirely buy the premise. And because I don't buy the premise, and this is something that they've known about for decades at this point, if they're telling me, or if they're making this argument that we just stumbled across this, golly gee, and we learned that it wasn't swamp gas. I mean, man, we're shocked by this. And then they make a report, and the report only goes back a few years. They don't go back to like Betty Barney Hill. They don't go back to some of the other big name, reports of crashes. They don't even go back to Roswell, for God's sake.
Or Phoenix Lights, even in the 90s.
Oh, the Phoenix Lights. That's right. I mean, so they constrained it to just a very few years in the context of the conversation. So I don't know. I mean, I get the feeling that somebody is running a play and they're trying to expose this information in a very particular fashion. But again, this stuff is going clear.
Yeah, that kind of brings me. I wanted to ask you about, UFO amnesty, kind of the concept of, giving people a pass who might have held secrets behind. And I kind of wonder if this kind of recent legislation and stuff is kind of a way to almost do UFO amnesty without actually saying we're giving people amnesty. And by doing that, and say just, we'll focus on new stuff, we'll find new evidence, and then just kind of forget about all that other stuff. You think that might be kind of trying to get to amnesty, or if so, would you agree with that?
So I'm not sure. Like, I don't know if that's in people's heads yet. Like, because I know what you mean. The moment that you said, the moment the government, I don't know, has, let's say, some kind of report or multiple reports, and it's, look, it's not us. It is outside there. Oh man, I think all sorts of questions come out the box. That being one of them. It was like, wait a minute, what about these people who've been lying all of this time? Have they been breaking the law by lying to the American public about some kind of, this kind of radical moment in human history? And at that point, that question comes up. What does the DOD know? That comes up. How long have things been invading our airspace that you've been aware of that you haven't been telling the American public on, or for that matter, raising it with either the president or Congress on? Like, there's all sorts of questions that come up.
Well, there's also the element of
abductions,
the abductions, the lives that have been destroyed, the people who've been demoted and fired, or businesses lost. And in one case, a guy killed himself over this kind of information. I just, and I'd love to get your thought on this, because in this country, we promised 40 acres and a mule a couple 100 years ago. Yeah. And that promise has not been fulfilled. So if you're going to give amnesty and fulfill, or not give amnesty and hold these people accountable, I just don't know how you could politically sell that before, all of the other agreements that we haven't fulfilled. And I'm curious, what do you think about that?
I guess the main question is, were they breaking the law by not saying anything, or were they living up to the standards of the law by not saying anything? I hope that makes sense. Like, you have all sorts of situations where people do ghastly things. Mike Pompeo said, "I lie, cheat, and steal for a living for the CIA," and everybody applauded him, like, "Yes, he lies and cheats for a living." And if so, I guess my point is, you have all sorts of people in government doing all sorts of pretty horrible things, and it's their job on some level to shut up about it. And if you have this kind of chain of command where they keep telling people, you shut up, you don't say anything, you keep your mouth shut. If you say anything, you're going to be prosecuted. Are those people liable at that point? And I don't know if they are. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think they're liable to us and to the American public in regards to, you guys been lying for this time and destroying careers. But just because they've been destroying careers and lying doesn't necessarily mean they weren't doing it prodded and pushed by their superiors to do it.
Or how about, like, what do you think about providing forgiveness or amnesty for people, just in the sense of how big of a topic this is and how scary of a topic this is? Like, UFOs could be real, aliens could be real. Maybe you just don't even know what to say about it or think about it, right? Or
I got to be honest, I'm inclined to believe that they're probably going to get amnesty on it. I don't even think the amnesty thing is going to be a question per se, at least not one that's overarching where it dominates the conversation. Don't get me wrong, it'll come up. I mean, the moment that the alien stuff comes into fruition, you have all sorts of stuff that's going to come up. They're going to be making story after story after story on this stuff. And this is invariably going to be one. What has been happening to people who wanted to come forward, who they've been basically lying about? Has NASA been scrubbing the videos in the way that some of these people said? Does the U.S. have access to a craft? I think the amnesty thing is going to happen. And I'm not entirely even sure if I'm all that much against it. I mean, because to me,
I'm not.
Yeah. I mean, because if you think of all the secrets that government runs with, and I remember Lou Elizondo, for example, was like, I'm trying not to get arrested. He's under orders. Like, and so it's not just him. It's almost like for the last 80 years, that's been the prevailing narrative and the prevailing modus operandi in regards to the way government has behaved with the issue. You may get some leaks, but all things being equal, people shut up. So I don't know if you can prosecute people under that guideline. Like, I think you have a hard time doing it. Think about the number of people who die in drone killings. And the Pentagon just says, clean kill.
Yeah.
We hate the fact that all these people died, but clean kill. Right. If they'll do that with that, what about the UFO issue? I strongly suspect that the amnesty thing is just going to come along with it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be
do you think
standard.
Actual, everyday people, though, will be forgiving, abductees, let's say, who...
Oh, that's the interesting part. It's like, will abductees forgive the fact that they were trying to seem crazy and everything else? They may not. They're probably going to be salty about that. I mean, for the last 80 years, they'd be like, oh, those guys are crazy. They're lucid dreaming. They're having sleep paralysis, despite the fact that they're not taking at night. Yeah, I think you're going to have some people in the community that are going to be angry. But I think the overwhelming majority of it is going to be so shocked with so many other ideas in their head that this is not going to be one of the prevailing issues. I could be entirely wrong. But if I'm thinking of okay, what is the civilization like? How far did they come from? Why are they here? Like, there are 1,000 questions that are going to be asked back to back to back to back. And that stuff is going to go on for months, if not years, of this kind of new feeling of, oh my God, we're not alone. And what does this mean? I think that's going to be the main grappling point. What does it mean? How does the world conform to the fact that we're no longer alone? What does society look like with the fact that we're no longer alone? What does society look like with this kind of Star Trek level of technology that we're talking about? And what does our day-to-day life look like as a result of that? I think those questions are going to be dominating the space. There are going to be some people who absolutely bring up, these guys have been lying, they've been destroying lives. But I really think that's going to be a minor heading on this, as opposed to, oh my God, this is real. I think it's going to be the latter. That's going to be more prevalent. I could be wrong though. All of this stuff is speculation at this point.
Yeah, right. Well, John Music with a $10 super chat donation. Thank you so much, sir. Being said that there's both a cold war between China, Russia, and the U.S. over UAP reverse engineering and war between. Did I read that right?
The war between good and bad non-humans.
A UAP reverse engineering war. Okay, right. So what he's saying is China, Russia, and U.S. are having a reverse engineering
program,
arms race almost. Good and bad non-humans over Earth or humans, maybe both. Would be cool to discuss it with you guys soon. I mean, what do you think of that? I mean, do you think that a possibility of sort of a reverse arms race in a way, a reverse engineering arms race?
Well, if that's a given, I take that as a given. I mean, I totally take that as a given. If you come across, I mean, even, like I said, in Gillibrand's amendment, trying to understand how they fly, the physics that they operate on, the propulsion, the energy, the material, all of that stuff is coming along with the program. And so if you stumble across, let's say, a ship, and you have these kind of off-world vehicles or whatever else, let's say like a Bob Lazar speaker or something to that effect, by definition, you'll try to get into it. I mean, you're going to try to figure out any and everything that you can to figure out how that thing works. I think the catch is, though, it's not going to be in collaboration with anybody. So you may have this little thing that's siloed, where you have a few people who are basically working on trying to understand some aspect of it, and they're working their way back, which is kind of the limiting factor on it. And I suspect China and Russia would be the same. I mean, for God's sake, Russia was involved in these kind of psychic studies. That's the reason the US got involved in remote viewing and stuff. And so it's like these guys were mirroring each other in regards to what they were learning about the universe, or for that matter, what they were learning about things that were off our shores. And so if the US has a program like that, I wouldn't be shocked at all to believe that Russia doesn't have its own program, or for that matter, China. And I suspect each and every one of them are looking for some level of advantage for their own country, be it militarily, be it for that matter, defensive technology, or rocketry, or science, engineering, and all that stuff. Yeah. I guess the catch becomes, will these guys work together if anything is found out that it becomes more significant? Does it become a point where the competition amongst ourselves falls away into this kind of, okay, we need to collaborate in order to move our world to a better place where we can compete with a larger community? That's the part that I'm real sketchy on. I would hope, like in my best interest of things, it would be kind of like Ronald Reagan, where he comes out and says, if this world was attacked, all of these worlds, all of these countries will come together and everything else. I hope that's the case. But at this point, I don't think so. These guys are probably in their own little sandboxes, trying to get as much information and data that they possibly can. And I suspect that some of these reports that these guys are putting out, that part of the reason as to why may boil down to this notion that the US thinks it's falling behind and considers it to be existential. And whereas we're limited in how much we can glean and gain from research into the subject matter, if these guys are kind of siloed out into their own little components. Well, if you acknowledge, hey, there's something there, and you can actually research it, and you get rid of the giggle factor, and you have your scientists pouring over data and everything else, it may give you some advantage going into this kind of next era of human development and technology. But do I believe all of them are doing it? Yeah, I believe all of them are doing it. I wouldn't even be shocked if India is doing it at this point. Yeah. All of these are huge nations. All of them have a certain amount of revenue that they could do the tests and studies. And all of them are engineering, or let's say scientifically proficient enough to try to ascertain whatever they can out of it. But I really do believe the collaboration is the thing that will set this, through the moon in regards to their ability to kind of understand and kind of progress on it. Right now, it's just competition.
Yeah, you mentioned the giggle factor, and I wonder what you think about the change of the name from ASRO to ASTRO. I personally love it, but I do think it does kind of raise a possibility that it might be kind of, oh, this Astro out of this world program and raise the giggle factor.
Yeah, I feel you on that. I guess it could either way, right? It may have something to it. I think the giggle factor is falling away, though. I mean, I could be wrong. It just seems like what I remember when people used to talk about it to what they talk about it and how they talk about it now, it's just night and day. Like, I've never seen the situation where mainstream media will bring on somebody. They may bring on like an abductee, and they're using it kind of for this joke factor. Like, so you're in a relationship with aliens, huh? It's like, yeah. How does your wife think about that? Well, she's jealous. And they would just go through this whole line where the reporter's just kind of laughing behind the scenes. Now, I don't get that impression. I mean, I get the impression where they're asking serious questions, 60 Minutes, or when the media is doing these interviews of Elizondo, like on CNN or whatever, or you get these kind of military pilots. They're framing this stuff in a very credible way. It's not asked in this kind of skeptical, are you sure this is true? Were you inebriated? They're not asking it that way.
Well, it's a lot harder to ridicule an
exactly.
F-18 fighter pilot than it is, a fisherman.
Exactly.
Not or that the fisherman's, and that's not saying that the fisherman's eyewitness testimony isn't credible or valid. It's just, it's a lot easier to make fun of that person,
exactly,
at least from a PR perspective, than it is, someone who actually served their country and had bullets whizzing by his head. Or
1000% agree. Not to mention, you invest billions of dollars into their training to be trained observers. And so, yeah, I mean, and you have like Lindsey Graham, you have Rubio, all of these guys are serious politicians. And so it's like the moment that they're coming out having this conversation about it, the moment that you get John Brennan coming out saying stuff about it, or I can't think of the other guy's name, I think Clapper. You're getting some heavy hitters, like talking about basically UFOs and aliens. I mean, the woman who's head of the CIA, she was just recently having a conversation where she dropped the word extraterrestrials in regards to the conversation. Gillibrand is even talking about human effects. Like, how does this craft or this phenomena affect human biology and physiology? Like, I've never heard them have that level of conversation where they're actually saying human beings are encountering something that's having some effect on their physiology. I mean, it just seems like the way and the framing of the conversation has just dramatically shifted to, even though we don't know what this is, we know it's something. Yeah. And that's a day and night from my standpoint, from the way they used to talk about the issue.
No, it's definitely significant. Real quick, NeuroStream with a $10 donation, super sticker. Thank you so much for that. G. West has a question. If Gillibrand's amendment passes, do we immediately get stuff like the 23-minute video? Or is it more like, sorry, that was filmed before the amendment? I from my understanding of this amendment is that this is going to have the power to look back into the history of this topic and actually get some information. So if that 23-minute video exists, I think it depends on if it reveals any sort of classified systems or flying techniques or anything like that. They might find any excuse in the book to not unclassify it.
Right there. I think it's that.
But I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's that. I think they're going to find any and everything in the book. If they got a 23-minute video out, they could show that video anytime. I mean, just like they showed the other videos. This kind of gets into why I think there's a playbook, or there's a ball being run. Whereas, how do we want to give them something so definitive that we're in a new world? It's that question. And if you have a 23-minute video of a craft, going Mach 10 and then making a right turn, or blinking in and out of existence as it's moving and then, splitting apart and coming back together, reality is shaped. Reality is different after that video. If they are trying to manage how the public accommodates the information, and they don't want to spook the public and freak the public out, and they want to kind of bring the public slowly along, where at the point where it becomes clear it's not us, the public has been so saturated with this question that they're basically can accommodate whatever the question or whatever the answer is. So if it's not like, okay, here's a video of a craft that's 23 minutes long and the whole world is like, oh my God. It becomes 2 years or 3 years of saying, we don't know what it is. Here's another report. We don't know what it is. Here's another report. Finally, okay, we know what it is. And they're like, yeah, dude, we were already there. We knew you were gay. It's that type of thing. Like, where it's like, okay, you didn't tell us for all of these years. And then it's like, okay, I'm coming out the closet. It's like, dude, we already knew, man. We knew years ago. It's kind of like that. I think they're going to try to desensitize the public to that stuff. And to Gillibrand's credit, I don't think Rubio, Gillibrand, or any of these guys can come out and say they're aliens. I do think, though, that they can give you one insinuation after the next that it's not us, and the things that they say and the things that they do to get to the public to a point where when it finally comes out, yeah, we don't think it's us, that the public is not freaked out. The public has been grappling with it for years. The trial balloons and everything else that have been put up, the public at this point accommodates the information and they move forward with it without this kind of freak out. But I don't think they're going to show that 23-minute video for the exact same reason, in the sense that if they wanted to shape people or change people's reality, you show the video. If you don't want to do that, you don't show the video.
What do you think the goal of this playbook is? Is it ultimately to give us the truth, or is that a totally moot, just beside the point?
I think it's a version of the truth. I mean, I don't necessarily think it's going to be completely. I mean, oftentimes in politics, what they leave out is like context, or they drop context, or they drop out certain information that would, like, if they gave you a fuller appraisal of it, you may jump to certain conclusions that may be true that they don't want you to necessarily have. And that's just in politics in general. They will say, look at what this person is doing, missing the fact that you're doing something that's pissing that person off to get that person to do it. You drop the context of your actions in it and you focus on the other person. And in doing so, the public are going to take a certain perspective that was baked into the cake for you to take that perspective in general. And that's just on basic politics. What does this mean when you're in the black? Or you're in this kind of X-Files area where all of that stuff is in some kind of black project, or that stuff is some kind of special access project. It becomes that much more fraught, where what's true becomes that much more nebulous to know. I got to be honest, I don't believe they're telling us exactly the truth, just because I think they already knew what a lot of this information it is. And they're very active in trying to manage how people accommodate the issue and manage what people, like how they understand it, and even the way that media is relaying it. On some level, it's dishonest, right? I mean, if they knew what it was in advance and they're acting as if we just stumbled across this, then they're not being straightforward in the way that they're trying to present the information. So I think they're not necessarily entirely being honest. And I don't think we're going to get the entire story. I think we're going to get a version of it. I don't know what, it's like, what is that version in the context of the main story? Who knows? I don't even know how anybody would know whether the story is real or not.
Right.
I think we're in the dark.
It kind of brings up a question to me. It kind of like, what is appropriate to disclose? The UAP task force had a bunch of cases, I forget how many, but over 100. John Greenwald filed a FOIA to get, the details of those because it was all classified. It recently came back saying that those were all exempt from disclosure. We're not going to, he's filing an appeal, but as of now, we're not going to get any more information about any of those. Yeah, which is extremely frustrating to me. But, I do hear people like, Zach Seichi has been talking about how he's very frustrated that we get these reports from the government basically saying, oh, these weird things, unknown things that we can't figure out. Might it be appropriate if these reports are all just, these are just weird unknown things and there's really no information we can glean from them? Is it appropriate to not give us these, red herrings and kind of wild goose chases and keep it classified? Or do you think we should be giving it all regardless?
And let that stuff out. I mean, look, I know they're going to classify some of it just by definition, like whether it gets into energy, weapons, those type of things where they may not want to disclose. And they may even not even want to disclose because of contextual stuff. Like, we don't know if everything that's visiting this planet is love and light. How do we know, right? And we don't even know, like, whether the U.S. government even knows whether everything is love and light. Like, all of that stuff is just a question mark. And so, they're going to be somewhat skittish in regards to the information they relay. The more information they relay, the less control they're going to have in shaping and crafting a narrative around the information. So they're probably going to be hesitant to just kind of say, here's everything. They want to keep some kind of power in regards to the knowledge base. But I think if you're going to have a situation where you come out with changing a Navy division, coming out with a new report, where you're creating a whole nother division that hasn't existed before, basically an X-Files division, even another one, what is it? A transmedium device
advisory committee.
You should at least explain why you're doing that. You should, the public should get some level of knowledge about.
They saw the latest Bond movie.
It's just weird. It's like, we're not going to tell you anything about it, but we're telling you we're creating these agencies. All right. Are you going to give us the underlying reason as to why and what you guys are seeing and what you guys are looking at? something. I mean, but again, if the objective is to get the public to realize, okay, this is a real thing, then you show that 23-minute video and you show them doing this kind of right turn. If your goal is to not do that and to desensitize and kind of lead the public on for a period of time, then you don't show that stuff. And you just keep pumping out reports that don't really necessarily give anything concrete. I hope that's not it. That's going to be massively frustrating.
Well, I would like to see, honestly, if in 2 years, the only thing that this office does is get us the full versions of the videos that are already publicly released. Yes. Give us the full Tic Tac, give us the full Go Fast, and give us the full gimbal. So that way we can go to McWest and all of the other naysayers and say, okay, here's a 14-minute version of it. And here's all of the systems that they went through to check to make sure it wasn't a bird or, a false radar return. That to me would be immensely successful. And I don't understand why that would be difficult to unclassify to the American people. It already has been confirmed. Yeah. It's real. So let's just get more data on it so we can have the discussion now, like a legitimate discussion, because that's the hang up, is that the video is too short, doesn't show enough. It's not scientific enough. We need more data. And they're right. While at the same time ignoring the totality of everything that's going on there.
That's a lot to ignore to come to.
It's a lot to ignore, but from an Avi Loeb's perspective, it's not enough.
Yeah.
From Neil deGrasse Tyson's perspective, it's not enough. And from Mick's perspective, it's not enough. And I go and I'm like, I get it. It's not enough. We need more. Yeah. Like, even as someone who's seen one of these damn things in front of my face, I still need more. I can't put my story on the table and say, believe it, it's real, because no one's going to listen to that. They don't have my perspective. But if they've got the video with the confirmation, longer versions, and an explanation of why this is an unknown and why this is important to track, not only from a national security perspective, but just from a world perspective, people deserve to know, especially the American taxpayer, because damn it, we paid for these toys. Yeah. And going back to what you said earlier, I don't think Russia and China and the United States are in any way sharing any information on anything. I don't think that happens until their hand is forced to do so. If they come back and they come to the realization, oh, this is an actual existential threat, in 15 to 20 years, this is going to be something that's on our doorstep looking for a fight, then I think that's when we start seeing an international
Did you guys feel like Bill Nelson when he spoke at the Washington Cathedral, though, he seemed to imply that either historically or at least going forward that we would share things with countries like Russia, but China, not so much.
Yeah.
And you think we do have that relationship, in space?
We used to.
Maybe we had some kinds of, classified conversations about things we'd both seen, out there.
In the old days, when, let's say, Boris Yeltsin or Gorbachev was in office and the U.S. relationship with Russia had kind of turned this corner, there was communication during that time. During the Second World War, there was basically war planning. Uncle Stalin, Uncle Joe. The nickname for Stalin at that point. So yes, Lou, to make your point, in dire emergencies, the other stuff kind of falls away, and then you can get some kind of organization. But I agree with you. I think they're probably at this point competing, and like I said, I really do believe that part and parcel to the reason that the U.S. is coming out with this now is because they believe it can get some level of an advantage based on our technology, military tech, and everything else. Faster than some of the other countries could leverage that information on. They may think we have an advantage in regards to the information that we know on the subject matter. And so, under that guideline, then they're not going to be working at all. Especially if they're just considering themselves in competition with one another currently, until something pushes it. As for the other one, in regards to more information, look, there's going to be some people who could see an ET or UFO hover above their head, and then blink out in the middle of, in the blink of a second, and they would still say, I think I just had a stroke in that very specific moment. Like, meaning there's no amount of information that would be sufficient. I mean, if you think back to the Nimitz had a situation where they had a radar signal. The radar signal called the ship to investigate and to basically intercept. You had 2 ships, 4 people who were basically looking at this thing for several minutes, I think like 5 minutes. And at this entire time, the radar is picking up all of it. It's not a radar glitch because the people, either it's a radar glitch and people coincidentally stumbled across a UFO, which I don't necessarily buy, or all of the military people are lying in that process. And then the ship itself, meaning the aircraft, had busted technology also. Like, there's so much that you would have to basically, okay, all of these people are liars. All of this equipment is banged up. It's too much. It's too much of a hurdle to kind of overcome. But I do get the thought that there needs to be something definitive that anybody who looks at it says, yes, that's what it is. But even with that, if it's a video, they could say that video is spoofed. Right. The video is not real.
How about this, guys? Do you think, I mean, Jamarl, but anybody, I guess, do you guys think that we fake share UFO information with other countries?
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. I don't.
I mean, I'm trying to think what would be the
advantage.
I guess kind of almost like the UAP report would be almost like an example of that, right? Like, maybe we really know what these Tic Tacs are, but we release it as though we don't know. You know, so there's this. So we give it an impression,
domestic consumption, if that's true.
You know, an appearance or the optics. You know, that we're working together.
I mean, kind of like what the Russians purportedly did to us with remote viewing, right? Like, maybe we're trying to send them down to a wild goose chase by looking at over their nuclear facilities or something.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what it's funny. That's what initially when they first started remote viewing, it was like, there's no way this is real. This is, I can't believe we're investing money in this. And then later on with the Iran crisis and some of the other things that they were doing, they found out, okay, maybe it is. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know the advantage. I mean, for domestic consumption, I can see the advantage. Oftentimes media tries to, puts out a certain amount of propaganda to keep people point of view between 2 guardrails. But I don't know if other countries will fall for that.
I do like the thought, and I'm pure speculation, but this idea of the reasoning why they're coming out with this report, they're letting these amendments be written and Navy protocols being changed. I think part of it is and combination with, I don't put any technology past the realm of human ingenuity, especially if the budget's right. But I wouldn't shock me if all of this stuff is sort of a shot across the bow to our enemies saying, we've got something. Don't mess with us. Yeah. Don't try any bullshit, because if you do, we're going to be coming at you with something a little different. That I could kind of go, that's possible, you know.
But you got to show that though.
Right.
I mean, like I gave an example when China flew the hypersonic travel vehicle or whatever it was. They call it a missile, but they're saying it's some kind of vehicle. It went all around the world, hypersonic speeds, and then missed its target by like a few miles after going all around the world. Well, that's pretty ballsy technologically to pull off. That's a difficult thing to do. Or when Russia first launched its hypersonic missiles and people were like, what the hell is that? And, again, technological proficiency. The U.S. supposedly had a weapon in space that it wanted to show off for the last several years, especially when Space Force was first christened. They wanted to be able to show it as look at the capability of the United States as a deterrent. Meaning, in order to kind of get it as a deterrent effect, you have to tell what it is. And you have to show it on some level to show that you've been able to weaponize it. So when China knocks the satellite out the sky, when Russia knocks the satellite out the sky, it gives everybody else is forewarned. This is a capability that these guys have. For the U.S. to get some kind of effect off of that, they're going to have to show it. They got to show it. Meaning you have to show that you can weaponize it. You got to show some level of credibility that you either have it or can use it in this kind of operational capacity. Think of the nuclear weapons. Let
me ask you this, though. I mean, I feel like, especially with something like I'm trying to think of the plane, the stealth bomber, or what's the other plane I'm trying to think of? That
SR-71.
The SR-71 Blackbird. That was publicly released, if I'm not mistaken, in 1988 or 86, somewhere around there. And so that tells me, well, they probably had that plane for 20 years. There's a good chance maybe they even dropped a bomb or two with it and never.
It was a surveillance plane, though. I don't think it did drop bombs. And I think that might be the difference.
Well, then stealth bomber.
Yeah,
it wasn't a bomber. Okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean, with the stealth bomber, I know the stealth bomber, they would fly that thing over Los Angeles before it was ever talked about.
Really?
Just to see, to give a test run of what would happen to our phone systems, what would happen to our communication systems of people seeing this in the sky. Yeah. How would they react? Would they call the police? Would they call the fire department? Would those systems get jammed? So that way,
that crazy reminds me of Phoenix Lights. I mean, it's how can you not think about the Phoenix Lights when you describe that?
No, but that's exactly right. And so, like, this idea of them sort of testing it on our population to see what the reaction is, because that information is valuable in the field of war. Because if people are going to react in Los Angeles or Phoenix to something and how they react to it, that means Chinese citizens might also think it's a UFO. Russian citizens might also think it's a UFO, and that's valuable. That's valuable data. So that's kind of where I'm like, you know, part of me thinks, I think all of these stories fit into this one big story. It's like an umbrella. I think a lot of these things are true, and it's not going to shock me if, it's military tech. And it's also something we have no clue of what it is. And it's reverse engineered. Yeah. And it could maybe, I don't think so.
I think all of it's true. Yeah.
I think all of it's true. But I don't think China or Russia have anything remotely close to this. I really
I don't know. Because I don't live there. That's the catch. Yeah. And the Soviet Union has been doing research into UFOs themselves. And so I would imagine, Russia being
right. But I'm thinking of like, we were talking the other day on Michael's channel, Singularity Lab, like Russia has, like California has more money than Russia, like it's California is a bigger economy than Russia. It's so poor that I don't think they would have the capabilities or the funds to really invest into the metals, the properties, the physics.
I don't buy that, buddy.
You don't buy that at all.
How do you get advanced tech like this? Is it just luck because it happens to crash in your borders, right? So are we presuming then that the US,
even if it crashes in your borders,
we're basically confiscating it?
I don't even think that you need a crashed craft to reverse engineer. They might just be looking in the sky and seeing that, these objects are moving in ways that we don't know capable. Let's get our best minds to figure out how that is, practically possible, and kind of reverse engineer what they see without actually having a physical thing to look at.
I guess if there was a craft, that would be the money, right? And so would that be more of a game of luck, though, right? Just where it happened. It happened to crash in China or it happened to crash in Russia.
Yeah, it's luck. Right? I mean, it just depends on where it crashes. I mean, if it dropped into the Soviet Union, would Russia have access to it as some kind of secret base? I'll say yeah. And how much? Because if you look at what the United States spends money on, we spend ungodly sums of money, and it's like you have to believe that we're getting the bang for the buck for the money that's being spent. And I got to be honest, we're probably not. No, I mean, we spend so much money on the military budget. And you think it's like half of the budget is basically personnel costs. And on top of that, you have all sorts of companies, grifting companies, very few of them, that gets billions and billions of dollars off of the dime of the United States. And are those companies charging the U.S. fairly, honestly? Or do all of those companies have an incentive on inflating the price in order to get more money out of the U.S. government? I think it's the latter. And so it's like when we're looking at the amount of money China spends on military, or Russia spends on military, or any of these countries, you have to kind of come into this notion of, are they getting bang for the buck? And is there a return on investment for whatever they're spending their money on? I don't necessarily think you need to spend $1 trillion a year to be able to kind of retroactively reverse a product, especially if you have already plenty of scientists and mechanical engineers and everything else. I think that's for China or Russia. And we're talking about massive land masses. And so, in the same way that the U.S. had available crash sites, I would be shocked as if Russia or China didn't have crash sites. I would be shocked if India didn't even have crash sites, to be honest. I don't think we're any special in regards to where these things like you were saying, I think it's just a factor of luck on some level. But I wouldn't underestimate Russia's scientific prowess. And
I don't know. I just look like when I see pictures of Russian cosmonauts going up in their rockets,
yeah,
it looks straight out of the 60s. Like it just does not look comfortable. It doesn't look high tech in any sort of fashion. It literally looks like it's something strung together with fishing string and toilet paper. And I'm supposed to believe that these guys are going to reverse engineer UAP?
Our government can't even send astronauts to the space anymore. We don't have a space shuttle.
Yeah, we don't have any spaceships.
That's fair, but at least but our country's rich enough to produce private entities that can pursue those things with government grants.
Well, the government gives a ton of money to it. I mean, in fact, this kind of gets to the whole grift argument. Do you believe that the $1 trillion we're spending on military is going and we're getting return on investment? Or do you believe that that money is on some level a lot of grift in it? I think there's a lot of grift in it, especially when there's no entirely hard way to audit what that money is being spent on. And many of the programs that it's being spent on is in black. I don't have this full good faith belief that the money that we're dropping into our military is being used in the best interest. I think a lot of this stuff is overblown. So when I'm looking at military budgets like China or like Russia or some of the other countries, I don't think it requires this ungodly sum of money to be able to do that stuff. For example, if you're not paying, let's say your Chinese engineers, if you're not paying them some ungodly sum of money, you still have a proficient group of scientists. I mean, you can look at Cuba and think about the amount of money that Cuba has at its disposal. Plenty of doctors, plenty of universities, plenty of schools. Those things don't cost any money in order to do. I wouldn't be shocked if the same thing applied to Russia. Also, keep in mind, the Soviet Union had been in play for decades. And so in the same time that the US was having this kind of missile race and everything else, they were still studying that stuff. Right. So it's not like they're starting at ground zero in regards to, moving forward. Like China, I would say China was probably starting at ground zero early on, just because they were kind of late to come into this notion of world competition and whatnot. But I don't know. It's for the longest time, I had this impression that the U.S. was leading on this issue and that the other countries, for whatever reason, wouldn't really say anything about it. And the U.S. was kind of like everybody was looking to the U.S. and determining what it was going to do on the UFO issue. But I think that's a little bit secondary to examinations and trying to figure out if you have some kind of access to crash sites or something to that effect. They probably thought the same about the nuclear bomb. And within 10 years of the U.S. having the nuclear bomb, Russia had their own, or the Soviet Union had their own.
There are, by the way, I don't know if I haven't looked into it, but there are private space companies, outside of America too, to keep in mind. I think even in Russia. What about, Jamarl? What about, since we just seem to be kind of on this path, private space companies in America?
I gotta be honest, I hate it.
Are they going to be loyal to U.S.? Like we're talking like that's one and the same, right? Now, I guess.
They're for-profit enterprises. They're trying to maximize their profit.
Yeah. So are they going to? Why are they going? Are they going to be sharing all the secrets and everything they find? With the American government? Or are they going to be trying to get bought off by people?
Well, because from their standpoint, it's about maximizing profit, and so from the business is oriented in a way that, okay, how can we make as much money as we can possibly make? And if that means we're getting secrets, we're learning stuff that's in space and everything else, that stuff is going to be proprietary to the company. I don't believe for a moment that they're going to be sharing that data unless it's something that they're working in collaboration with the United States, in which case then they may share it, but the public is probably not going to see it.
Well, in a way, they are in a collaboration with the United States. They're getting tax benefits.
They're
getting huge subsidies to build these toys and make space a profitable venture. So I get, and this kind of goes to my next question. Ryan Sprague had this up. And by the way, to all of my Russian colleagues out there, this is not a knock on the Russian people. It's a knock on the Russian government. And I just have doubts. I don't have doubt that Russians could be the first to maybe crack this. I mean, again, I put nothing past human ingenuity. Not there's no borders with that. So that could be any country. I just don't think. I'm just looking at what they have from a technological standpoint. I don't think they're anywhere close. Like this new plane that they released, the Sukhoi, whatever it is. I mean, it's a joke. It doesn't, like, from a military standpoint, it doesn't hold water to any military plane that's out there. You know, if this was 1996, maybe that plane has an advantage on some of the things we have in the sky now, but I don't think it has an advantage in any way today over the planes that we produce.
How do you explain the hypersonic weaponry? Because the U.S. will gladly tell you they have no idea. They're in the toilet on it. They don't have anything close to it.
I don't believe that for a second.
I'm telling you, well, I do get it, right? That you have a certain idea of how the world is put together. And it's like, and the U.S. hasn't been able to show its own military tech in that sense. Meaning, it's
what doesn't have to.
Say, you say, do they have to?
No, they don't have to. Is my point. They don't have to. If we have supersonic weapons that can traverse the planet in 20 minutes, why do they have to tell anybody about that?
Yeah, but I don't.
What's the advantage?
Mutually assured destruction.
But what's the advantage in not showing it? I mean, you just kind of mentioned this notion of, do you think that they're showing this as this kind of up in the ante to be able to show these are the capabilities and everything else? You have to show that. Like I said, if you don't necessarily, if you can't show it, nobody's going to believe that you have access to it. And as it going up to this point, the US was basically shocked that China was able to come out with tech to that degree, shocked that Russia was able to come out to tech to that degree. So I don't know, the competence thing. I mean, we've lost, what, 750,000, almost 800,000 people from COVID. I mean, competence is not necessarily something that we do all that well in this country. And if we're looking at from the standpoint of the way we use money, the way we use resources, and whether or not the stuff is put in competent leadership, it's just not a part of it. I don't buy it. I mean, if the US had, let's say, a space-based weapon, or if they had something that could compete with the hypersonic weaponry, they would have shown it by now. I mean, you have too many people asking questions like, whoa, that thing just went across the world. The US wasn't even aware of the technology at the point where Russia started basically putting it out. They used it as this kind of get around from the encroachment on their territory from either elements of the Ukraine or other elements of NATO. But I don't know. I mean, I would not, I wouldn't take this tact that Russia and China are somehow backwards, and so they don't have the capacity to retroactive, to re-engineer products. Because I got to be honest, up to this point, from the standpoint of the technology that those countries are exhibiting, even for the in space, we don't compete. We don't compete. I get that you may want to say, oh, they're not spending that much money on it. But I would be willing to wager that you don't necessarily know what's in their inventory any more than we know what's in the US's own inventory. But if they had it, they would show it. I don't believe for a moment that they would have China and Russia showing hypersonic technology and the US is just sitting back like, yeah, we could do that. We just choose not to at this moment. I just don't think they have it. Could be wrong.
Well, let me ask you this. It's the second part of Sprague's question, and it was, do you think if either a public entity, say like the Galileo project, got close to the answer,
would they tell it?
Would they, not so much would they tell it, would the government step in and say, no? Would they be able to nix it? Is it even possible? I mean, it's the U.S. government we're talking about. I feel like anything's possible.
I don't know. I mean, it's a private enterprise. Right. And so I don't know how much. Like
would prior restraint come in there?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, because it depends on what's his name is doing it. Is he running the information by anybody first? Are they like reviewing it to come to some kind of conclusion or some kind of evaluation before releasing it?
Well, yes, I think the idea is collect the data, do the math, write a paper, and then release it. It's going to go through a scientific process before it's confirmed and said, okay, this is a legitimate thing we're looking at here.
Something tells me it's a betrayal if the government sees it first, if that makes sense. I don't know how y'all feel about it, but it feels like the Galileo project, the entire point of it is this kind of private enterprise way of investigation. And in doing so, people feel that the government have lied to it, have withheld all sorts of data and information. And in this case, Galileo's somewhat the opposite in regards to the way they're supposed to function. It's supposed to kind of put the data out there. So I hope that's not the case. I mean, every time I've spoken to Avi, he's always been straightforward in saying, we're going to release it, we're going to release it, we're going to release it. So I hope he follows through with that. That would be horrendous if he turns around and because the catch is there possible information that comes out where they're like, okay, we can't expose this? And I don't know what that is. Like if you found out something where it's like, okay, yeah, you have multiple ships that are visiting the planet. We can dictate exactly what it is. And the government says, look, we can't have you disclose that. And they have a good reason. I don't even know what the good reason would be. Maybe we don't want the planet to freak out. Maybe there's some kind of deal or arrangement where nothing can be said about it. Whatever that is. Would he be brought into this kind of loop of like, okay, I'll keep this part a secret? I don't know. Like this stuff is so much of a question mark. It's hard to know what's true. And depending upon what's true, is there some caveat or lens on the truth that would make him gun shy in regards to exposing what it is? Oh man, I hope not, but I don't know. I hope he just gives up whatever he comes across personally.
Yeah, I think I don't have any worry that he won't. I mean, we've talked to him a few times as well, and I feel like he's very adamant about doing the science on it, coming to the conclusion and then releasing the data and have it peer reviewed and let the scientists debate whether or not it's a legitimate thing to look at. And I think that's what's exciting about it. I'm just curious to know, and I think what Sprague's question is if they actually found an answer to it, would that be considered a national security issue? And would the government come in and just put a kibosh on it? Not forcibly, just being like, okay, shut up or you're going to have a big problem here.
Well, let me ask you this. If they found, let's say Avi found something, and let's say the government is keeping tabs on whatever his research is, and they go to him and say, look, this is somewhat of a complicated issue. And we appreciate that you were able to get down to, let's say, the nub of an answer. But there's some things out there that we don't necessarily believe that we're at a point to let the American public know about for issues of safety. Does Avi shut up in that case?
Right.
Because keep in mind, for our standpoint, all of this stuff is a black box. We have no idea what this stuff is. And if the government is looking at a situation saying, all right, this is kind of complicated. There's stuff out there that is neutral and benign, but there's other stuff out there that's not neutral and benign. And we need to be able to create some kind of partition to keep the public unaware of this part. Would he fall into it? Would you guys fall into that? Would you basically accept the government's word on that, saying, okay, there's something that's dangerous that we can't necessarily tell the public, but we'll tell them this other stuff? Would they be able to bring you into the fold in that conversation?
Yeah, I wouldn't be convinced, but I think that it might be reasonable that, like they are keeping tabs on, the NSA is tapping their phones, and then they come to them and they don't ask them to do that, but they say, invoke some law. I'm not an expert, but I have read speculation that there are some like laws that they can like pull in and say, hey, this is now classified. If you do tell this, you're going to go to jail, even though it was your own independent stuff, in which case, God, hopefully Avi goes to Russia and discloses.
Yeah. Well, no, or does he go to jail? I mean, if you persecute someone like that and they decide, it would be like a Galileo, exactly who he's named this after. Like, Galileo was arrested by the church to shut up about science.
Yeah.
Would he be as forthright and as brave as Galileo and go to? Because I remember the first time I met Lou Elizondo, I was like, this subject needs a Nelson Mandela. This subject needs someone who's high up in this process to be willing to tell their story, classified or not, and hopefully they go through the proper process of first trying to contact the senator or local state representative, and if then that doesn't work, then just go straight to the media. But the end result is they get arrested and persecuted for it. I think that adds a lot of credibility to the person they just arrested. And then I think that maybe even angers some people to a point where like, that guy should be arrested. We want him out now. And does that manifest itself into a movement?
Oh man, there would be hell to pay if they tried to do that to Avi. I think there would be hell to pay. I mean, because I agree with you. I think they'll look at that issue and saying, how are you locking this guy up for telling the truth?
Right.
And I don't think that flies politically. I mean, don't get me wrong, they could do it, but I think there would be consequences. Not to mention, it kind of shoots themselves in the foot because it makes it seem like it's that much more real. It's like, he said this and you're locking him up. Why are you locking him up? Because he said that. Is it just so happened that what he said was legit? It's like you add legitimacy to it to do that.
Right.
I don't know, man. It's funny. I don't see them locking him up. But by the same token, I don't know what they know. And because I don't know what they know, I don't know if there's some kind of organization of an argument where the person would say, okay, fair enough. I will withhold this information for some kind of national security reasons. That's the part.
TG with a $5 donation, not a question, but sort of a statement. We always find out after the fact that big movies about off-world subjects have some truth, similar to the tech in the movies from the 1950s is now reality.
Yeah.
And that's kind of true. And we've heard about sort of how CIA has infiltrated the Hollywood production sets to sneak in technology that's real, just to see how people would react to the possibility of that technology. And then you look at Star Trek from the 60s and you look at some of the tech that's there is starting to come to fruition today. Of course, not the warp drives and stuff, but here we're talking about warp bubbles with Chris Plain whenever his article drops. Like this tech is starting to become a reality. So, I mean, kind of what are your thoughts on that?
I guess this is why I kind of hate the private enterprise thing for space. I am a Trekkie at heart. And so it's like this notion of profit-making enterprise rubs me wrong. I love this notion of the world kind of coming together for space. You know, it's like, who's going to own the moon? And should anybody own the moon? Like, it's the moon of the U.S. property. And I'm going to have these like U.S. territory and Russian territory and Chinese territory.
Well, it's whoever puts a flag in it first, right? That's the rule.
Right.
It's like, isn't the rule whoever puts the flag in it first, that's who owns it?
Yeah, I know, right? It's like Bezos land or something.
Yeah.
And then it gets weirder. It's like, if you have a situation where you have humans on, let's say, Mars, the moon, Earth, does it get to a point where those planets start considering themselves distinct from Earth? Like coming with their own culture, their own thought process, almost like America and England. England sent all of these different places out to Australia, Canada, America, etc. And after a while, they start considering themselves their own thing. I don't know. I mean, from the standpoint of Star Trek stuff, yeah, of course they want that technology. I mean, the research that came out with the ODNI report when they were showing all of the experiments and stuff that they were doing, that stuff was straight out of Star Trek. I mean, they were talking about invisibility, warp drive, electromagnetism, gravitics. I mean, the stuff was phenomenal. So to me, I look at that and I think space has this potential to kind of have the organizing principle of organizing the planet. But right now, it doesn't seem that way. It seems like everybody's kind of out for themselves.
Well, I'm going to provide a counter argument as to why I do enjoy the privatization of space.
Yeah.
It's getting better. There's not as much waste. I mean, Elon Musk in a short time has figured out how to launch a rocket into outer atmosphere and land it and reuse it in a short period of time.
Yeah.
NASA would never have the budget. I think they've had the vision. Maybe they thought of the idea, but they never can execute it. And it's like, we go back into that, are we getting an ROI? Is there a return on investment? Where with a private industry, there's a lot of issues with capitalism. Okay, for me. Yeah. But when I look at the world history, capitalism is the best thing we've got. Like, it's like compared to other things, like I take capitalism over a lot of other forms of government. It's not even a form of government, but it's just the way the world works. But this idea of, when VCRs first come out, they're a $1,200 machine.
Yeah. And
now they're non-existent. You could go buy a VCR for pennies if you found it in a junkyard or something, or in probably now an antique store you'll find a VCR. But I think through private industry, there's a lot less waste because obviously they're getting grants and tax breaks from the government. That's part of it. But when they put their mind to something, it gets done, and it gets done really quickly. There's a lot less red tape. There's a lot less BS. The innovation is faster. And so therefore, this idea of, I think in our lifetime, a ticket on a space bearing airplane type machine that can get you from, California to Saudi Arabia in 20 minutes it's going to be a very, very expensive ticket that's out of the reach of most people. But in 100, 200 years, it's going to be a bus ticket, because the technology is cheaper. And the reason why the tech is cheaper is because it's being produced and manufactured by a private entity that is trying to get it to that lowest cost.
And the competition, like what you're saying,
right,
to be fair, I mean, you've got the ego of but I always want to say Bezos. I guess that's right.
Blue Origin.
And Musk, but you have them up against each other, and they both want to do the same thing and be the first to colonize Mars. So for better
also got
and
Virgin
worse.
Atlantic too.
Yeah, Virgin Galactic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you're going to have more companies like that popping up, and that's going to drive the cost of space travel down. Because if you think that it's going to end with those three guys, I think you're sorely mistaken. There's a lot. I think those three guys are showing the market that there's a lot of room for anybody to get into this and make some money. But the initial investment's going to be massive. So I guess what's your sort of counterpoint to that?
So I guess from the standpoint of lessen waste, I don't think that's really true. I mean, oftentimes what you get is that the waste that they're dumping into, lakes, rivers, or they're dumping
I don't mean environmental waste. I mean financial waste.
Oh,
like
I see.
With a government program, we don't, as taxpayers, we have no idea where that money is going. Yeah. And the return on investment for an American taxpayer on NASA is nothing. Like, it's almost nothing. I mean, we do.
True. I mean, think of all of the
I don't agree with that.
I stand corrected. We have had technology
that came to fruition from NASA.
I stand corrected.
Like, if you think of like these portable electronics, I mean, even the rocketry thing in and of itself was.
What'd you say, rather?
Tang, the great orange drink.
Oh, and Tang, that's right. You're undermining Tang.
Who the hell here has drank Tang in the last 25 years? I dare anybody to raise their hand on that. I call BS. But I see what you're saying. Yeah.
But NASA has been, like, Bezos doesn't exist without NASA. Elon Musk doesn't exist without NASA. Right. I mean, I don't buy it. And also, this notion that those companies exist short of government influence, it doesn't exist. I mean, Jeff Bezos basically was able to the only reason he even exists as Blue Origin is because of the money he was getting from the government. There was no way he could raise that government or build that product on his own, left his own devices. It became a huge government money. In fact, the U.S. government, Bezos was complaining about a contract they basically lost to Elon Musk. Yeah. The government turns around and gives him billions of dollars just because. In this case, the government wants to create kind of a space industry in the United States. They want to make sure that they can have weaponry, space-based technology, et cetera. And so they're dumping a ton of money into Musk and Bezos. In Bezos' case, Bezos lost the contract, complained to high heaven, and they basically gave him a bunch of free money in order to do the space thing. So I don't know. I'm skeptical of their ability to do the stuff left to their own devices. They're going to be, sucking at the tit of government.
Yeah. But I mean, I feel like it is a collaboration between these companies and NASA. I mean, we're sending up NASA astronauts, right, using private technology. And so from the astronauts' perspective, I mean, they have full access to this stuff, and that information, I'm sure, is flowing back to NASA on how they can improve their satellites and space-bearing systems. It's valuable to NASA. Like the fact that they don't have to build the rockets anymore, they don't have to do the space shuttle anymore. They can focus on things like the James Webb Telescope and actually do what NASA's meant to do, and that's look into the solar system. Because space travel is super expensive. So instead of spending all of this money on things that have to go through red tape, and the progress is slowed to a point where it's like we had a space shuttle for almost 30 years. Like there was no upgrades on that thing because it was either too expensive or it didn't get approved or it had, what do you got there, Jane? What's going on?
This is just the 2016 NASA came out with all these posters.
Right.
About going to Mars. And you think, this was a year before, the UFO, New York Times story. And just, they've probably been planning for a long time, you know, and working toward these contracts. And so it, to what Jamarl's saying with like this bigger playbook and what is the goal here, I mean, it definitely seems like getting off this planet is a big part of it. And China
I think
is not on board.
I think NASA looked itself in the mirror and said, we can't do this. Like, we just can't. We don't have the bandwidth to do this. Like, I think they looked at Mars and they go, okay, we need reusable rockets. We need a cheaper way to get there. And NASA just does not have the bandwidth to explore all of these options, but an Elon Musk does, because he's got the motivation. So, and also he doesn't have to jump. If Elon Musk, if somebody comes to Elon Musk, and I don't think this is the way it works, because I think he gives them freedom to sort of develop these things. But if someone comes up with a great idea to change, to, I don't know, help fuel economy by 20%, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, let's do that. It doesn't have to go through a process. It's immediately implemented, especially if it works, and there's no waiting time for it. So I think that's kind of where I'm like, I'm good with private industry taking the ball on this, because if we left it just within the government, man, we would. Like, have you seen how cool those cockpits are and the suits that they're wearing? Like, everything's touchscreen. There's no more knobs or flickering of buttons. Like, everything is super high tech and comfortable, and there's space in those things. Like, it actually looks like something that we would see in a 1950s comic, you know? Like, I think of like Looney Tunes, you know, when the rocket would land straight like this, and then something would come out of the rocket, and it's like, dude, yeah, we thought about that 50 years ago, but it took a billionaire to make it 70 years later.
Well, Bezos's employees basically say he's going to kill somebody in that rocket, because they're making the point that it's shoddy engineering and stuff like that. I don't know about Musk. I haven't heard necessarily any negative about Musk in regards to the way this.
He won the contract with NASA.
He won the contract. Bezos basically was begging for money. I don't know. I'm doubtful about the private industry space thing. I mean, but from NASA's standpoint, their budget was cut, and at the point where their budget was cut, they couldn't do anything anyway. But the U.S. government is still spending money on it, whether it's spending it on NASA or whether it's dumping it into the pockets of Bezos and Elon Musk. So I suppose anywhere you go is where you're at. But
Apollo 11 with a $5 super sticker or super chat question. Rather, did you have a follow up to that?
No, go. Let's go.
Okay, all right. I thought you did. It looked like you did. What if there's a Stay Puffed Marshmallow Man aspect to this? Hence the secrecy. Remember, Dan Aykroyd manifested the purveyor of doom.
Well, that's the catch, and that's the question
of your disclosure.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's the question in regards to, is that the reason why they're holding something back? Like, if there was a Stay Puffed Marshmallow Man to it, should they disclose it to the public? That's the question.
Would? Yeah, would they?
Or should they? No, I wouldn't even go with should. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No, that is a great question. I mean,
like, if they don't have the capacity to do anything about the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, should they tell the public about the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man?
If it were up to me, I say no. I know that's an unpopular response, but like, for me, if I'm looking at something and I've got you know, the security clearances, and you I'm sure they murder board this. Like, what are the positives, what are the negatives? And I would think the negatives, the response negatively would outweigh the positive response, depending on the nature of the phenomenon. But if the problem is that people are going to start asking questions, and if you don't have those answers, it's going to make you look incompetent. Right. It's going to make you look weak. It's going to make you look all of these things, when all the government is trying to do is instill confidence, instill trust. And this topic completely erodes that, not because they don't want to give answers, but because they just simply don't have them.
Yeah, that looks bad. It does look bad. Yeah. I mean, but that's the question, right? I mean, if it was something that was something about the experience that was freaky, negative, or they didn't quite understand, do you get the public that information and leave the public kind of in the dark on it? I don't know. I think I might lean to your side on this. It's like, do you really disclose something if you can't explain what you're disclosing?
Right.
I don't know. That's a tough one.
What do you got, Rather?
Yeah. Well, kind of, speaking of disclosure, I was curious about your thoughts on the National Cathedral event that happened last week, as far as like symbolism and the importance of that. That seemed like a big step to me, but I'm not really. I've never seen anything else at the National Cathedral, so I wonder what your perspective is.
That was the one with Avril Haines. That was with Ivy Loeb.
Bill
Nelson.
Yep.
Yeah,
and,
that was over here.
Bezos showed up.
That's right. Bezos did show up to that.
Yeah.
I thought it was good. I mean, I liked that level of collaboration conversations. I mean, Avril Haines basically used the term extraterrestrial, saying, this may be aliens. Like, that's astonishing. Like, I don't think I've ever heard
an active sitting DNI. Yeah. We've heard former. We've heard former, with the James Clapper and the Brennans and even the Elizondos and the Mellons. Like they formerly had those positions and they've come out and now spoken. But never had a sitting, like actively working in that position come out and be like, it's a possibility these things are extraterrestrial.
Yeah.
Like we have to.
And with such like religious undertones and everything too, it really sounded like they were preparing us almost for something.
Yeah, it's like, what is, does aliens believe in Jesus? That type of stuff. What does it mean, one way or the other? I thought it was real interesting. I mean, I thought it was great. Those questions, man, we're going to be inundated with that stuff for years. Like, all of that stuff. What does it mean for us as humanity? What does it mean for us in regards to where we position ourselves in the cosmos? How are governments going to respond to it? Is it going to be something that weds governments closer together? How's the public going to respond to it? I mean, it's hard to kind of fathom what the society looks like on the other side of that. But they're grappling with the questions of it. So good for them. I mean, I just love the fact that NASA, the head of NASA is there, that Avril Haines is there. Yeah. And like you say, even Bezos, from the standpoint of private industry, getting its part of that conversation. Elon Musk has talked about it before, like aliens and stuff like that.
Well, Jeff Bezos looked like Lex Luthor.
Did he?
Oh my God, dude. He looked like a supervillain talking about this stuff. I mean, just the concepts that he was laying down were just like, you sound like you're really planning something evil here.
Wow.
And then Avi Loeb was even afterward. He was like, I don't know, maybe we should send AI to space and not people and endanger them, Jeff.
Well, his point was like, humans aren't made for space. Like, why would we send humans into space? And I think that's an awesome point. Like, why would you not develop the AI to do it first? Like, that seems make the most sense. It's the safest without a doubt. And you see these Boston Dynamic robots, like, I mean, you could easily see those things turning wrenches in space or building some sort of platform or base to sort of establish before humans get there. That's I 100% agree with him on that point. Real quick, Bottled Water says, according to the estimates, SpaceX has saved NASA somewhere between $30 to $40 billion, according to NASA. Just saying.
Wow.
I am curious to know, though, how much in subsidies and tax breaks Elon Musk got to save them that much money.
Right.
They got a ton of that
that's
stuff.
really the question. Is there an ROI?
I mean, I would say, by definition, it should save them money. If they don't have to build a craft.
Right.
Or if they don't have to use one of the older crafts. That's not necessarily the point I was making, though. I mean, the point I was making is they're getting that money. I mean, that's basically at the government trough saying, here's a ton of money in order to make your company X and Y. Right. And so, either way, the astronauts aren't going to control it. If NASA's not going to control the technology, if they're not going to control the plane, if they're not going to control the vehicle, if they're not doing the research in order to build the vehicle, then they shouldn't have to pay for it. It's like you buying an Uber. It's like, is Uber saving you money on any particular car trip? Yes. By the same token, is it more convenient to have your own car? Yes. It is more convenient to have your own car. But no, I mean, I'm not shocked that it saves them money on that front. I mean, of course, it should.
We got about 10 minutes left with you. So I am curious. I know, man, every time it's a time dilation. Every time Jamarl Thomas comes on the show. If you want proof of time travel, just start watching the show. Things fly by. I am curious, just based off of your political expertise, you look at these things a lot. You look at you're looking at bills as sort of your jam.
Yeah.
You know, it's your bread and butter. So I am curious, like, how do you feel about the bill? Because the one thing that we've discussed a lot on the show is that this bill has teeth. It's got actual power. It's an office that it looks like from the peripheral is going to be a desirable job within Congress, because you're going to have access to congressmen and women.
Right.
You'll be able to talk to them on a daily basis about the most secretive things on the planet. And that's desirable. Like, from a political perspective, it lets you still move up the political ladder in a topic that I think is going to be the most fun office to work in within DC, or the security apparatus. This is going to be a cool job. And before you kind of didn't have permission to pursue things like this because it would be political and career suicide. Right. This office now is hopefully going to exist when the laws pass. But I am curious to know, like, because government moves slow, so I'm trying to manage expectations here. What do you think happens in the first year if this gets passed as written? I mean, I you know, obviously we'll get the office by the end of June. What do you think? Is that enough time, a year, to get any significant information, or do you expect more of this stuff to sort of start coming to fruition the year after?
I get the feeling that at the very least we're going to get reports. Like, if nothing else,
at least one.
Yeah, at least one. It seems like that seems to be the direction that it's going in, almost like a follow-up from the ODNI report that came out. In regards to what they released to the public, I need to see what powers and authorities whoever they're putting in that position is going to have. Like, are they going to have the power to basically requisition information from the CIA, the FBI, ODNI, NSA, et cetera? Or is it something that you kind of have to, you know, rely on those groups to give you that information as they correlate the data? So it kind of depends on the authority that the person have. I remember Bob Bigelow was saying when he was working with the US government, they had somebody who was pretty high in the food chain that can basically pull those reports and get people to basically do what he says. And when that guy had left, well, at that point, they were stonewalled and they didn't necessarily have the capability to kind of pull the information that they wanted to pull. So I don't necessarily know who's going to be in charge of the organization, but at the very least, there should be at least one report that comes out. And I would imagine there's going to be more. They may even start organizing a secondary group, like with the Galileo Project, members of NASA, members of, you know, the political space, in order to kind of set the ground running. They're probably also at that point going to start filling those positions within the first year. So you're probably going to have people, you know, filling it out, even though it may not be full over the course of the year. They're going to start getting their bearings in regards to what they're spending their money on, what they're investigating, how they're going to investigate it, who they're going to be using for those investigations, how they're going to get that stuff across to the public. They're even probably going to be talking about how do we usher in the public to this kind of new understanding of awareness, regardless of what we find out in the analysis of it. But the research is probably going to take a while. I mean, that's probably going to be the thing that's the most painstaking. Like, how do you research it, and how do you get that information out? What tests do you put? Even what studies do you have? Are they just going to be studying old videos and stuff like that? Or are they going to be actively searching the sky for those type of products and stuff, or for those type of vehicles or whatever? It depends on how they go about it. But at the very least, the organization should start getting its legs behind it. We should at the very least get one or two reports that come out of it. And then we're kind of going to see where it goes from there. I'm very curious on how much information they're going to pull and how much they're going to give to the public. I think one of y'all said earlier, how much of this stuff is going to be classified when they get it, and what are they going to expose to the American public, for us, or for that matter, the rest of the world to see. I'm uber interested and curious about it. I'm very curious about it, because I think it's awesome. I mean, her amendment goes beyond Galileo's amendment.
Yeah, way beyond Gallego's amendment.
I mean, she's even talking about, what is it, a transmedium office, which is like, wow, a transmedium office. Like, she's making it separate and distinct for those transmedium vehicles that were coming out. I think it was Jermichael Bell or something like that was exposing it. Yeah. And so, no, man, I'm excited about this. I don't think we've seen anything like this, at least not in my lifetime, that is this extensive and that is using that many UFO buzzwords. Yeah. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it.
What do you got, Rather?
I think it's amazing. I think one of the cool things is that it's not even aerial anomalies at this point, is it? It's just anomaly resolution office. So, I wonder if they're going to be boots on the ground exploring things like in Skinwalker, and who knows, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
interesting couple of years.
I mean, my understanding is that, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but my understanding of the bill is that this office will have carte blanche as far as who they want to get information from. And if that office or that branch does not cooperate, then in next year's NDAA, their funding could be affected. It's like you don't get us the information, and don't be shocked if your budget shrinks. And that's the power of the bill. Well, go ahead, rather.
Well, yeah, I wonder, if there is an agency that they're trying to get information from, and they're fighting nail and tooth against that. Do you have any idea, like, how long that process might take for those teeth to actually grab hold?
Good question. Very good question.
I guess
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I could see the CIA or somebody basically saying, "Oh, we don't have this data," or stonewalling them on the data on some of that stuff, especially if they consider itself proprietary to whatever organization it is.
Right, but if the office feels stonewalled, that's when the power of the office kicks in. Because, I mean, this is a bill written by the two most powerful committees and subcommittees within the Senate.
Yeah.
Senate Armed Services Committee and the Intelligence Committee.
Right.
I mean, you're going to stonewall them? Okay.
It's probably going to be I imagine there's going to be some drama, right? There's going to be a little bit of back and forth to try to figure out how sharp these teeth are.
I get the feeling it is. I mean, you have some people who are uber religious. I mean, that was one of the things that Bigelow said, that people thought they were trying to open up the fourth level of hell or something to that effect, or the gates of hell.
Right.
I think that's more Skinwalker than some of the other stuff. But, I've known people who like, anything that's coming to this planet are demons. And, those people invariably are going to be in the military or some of these other organizations, unfortunately. But all things being equal, it's a movement forward. It's definitely a step forward. And so we're going to see what it is. But it's an exciting time to be aware. I mean, we're basically on the ground floor of this stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, talking to a lot of the old garb, and when I say old garb, I mean the researchers and the people who've been talking about this for decades, the shoulders that we stand on. I really like to say that, because if it wasn't for them, I don't think the conversation would be here. But the ones who've been really frustrated with this, like the Lee Spiegels, Peter
Bob
Robbins,
Jacobson.
Bob Salas, the guys who always had this idea of, this is never going to change, they're never going to tell us the truth, like their tune is changing. They have to start admitting, this is significantly different.
By the way, Bob Jacobs and Robert Hastings, they have a new book out talking about their own ET experiences. Have you seen this?
Yeah.
I haven't had a chance to read it. Is that book any good? I mean, they've never owned up to that. Especially Bob Jacobson, who's the one who was watching the missile being shot out the sky.
Bob Salas.
No. It was two. There was Salas and there was Bob Jacobson.
Jacobson was okay.
Well,
I think so,
he was the one that was basically taking video. He was working in some kind of photography or something like that. Yes. He's the one that saw the craft come in, shoot a beam, fly around it, shoot a beam, and they was like, "What the hell is that?" And he's like, "That looks like a UFO." You were never to use that word, sir. That type of stuff.
Well, what's fascinating is he didn't even see it as it was happening. He didn't see it until they showed him the film.
Yeah. I haven't had the chance to read the book. Is it any good? I mean, for the longest time, they didn't disclose that they had any experiences. This was somewhat of a recent phenomenon where they said, okay, fair enough, this has happened to us.
Yeah, I haven't read the abduction aspect of their story.
Yeah.
According to Ryan Sprague, it's weird. But then again, it's always weird. It's always weird. So but I and again, unpopular opinion alert, but here it comes. Like, I think if you're somebody of that class of witness, keep the personal stuff out of it, because
well, see, that's why they didn't tell.
It's a harder sell.
That's why they didn't tell. It's that.
Right.
Because their thing was, they was like, well, we don't want to undermine our credibility by saying we had some kind of interaction with it. So for like 20 years, they didn't say squat about it.
Right.
They just kept it to themselves.
Yeah, but then again, keeping it quiet for 20 years, then there's the other side of that sword is, well, why did you say anything? Why did you go? Like why? It's a lose-lose. That's why I'm like, I prefer you to just leave it out.
Yeah.
Just leave it out. Like I don't like if tomorrow David Fravor comes out with a story, I was abducted. It could be 100% true. It could be 100% true. But I think it immediately, and I know this sucks, and I don't agree with this.
But what if they were reptilians?
Unless he shows himself to be a reptilian, Jane, on national TV, I just don't think it holds any water. And I think it immediately undermines everything he said before it. It's just where we're at.
It's so weird to me. I mean, because if it is aliens, the abduction stuff is going to have to be explained.
It has to be. We'll have
to get there eventually.
Yeah, that conversation has to be had. I think right now the importance or the impotence of this bill and this conversation is to catch up the people outside of this community, the everyday average schmo, to the idea that there's a there.
Yeah.
And they need to pay attention to it.
But
and then once
are
everybody's
get
caught up there, I think you're right, Jane. I think we are going to get there. And once we get there, then we can open the can of worms and really start to dive into the dino beavers and the plasma balls and the portals and the reptilians and the grays and all of that stuff that we constantly hear all the time. I think it gives us permission to start talking about that. But it's like we've talked about this on the show. The guy's at a barbecue and he's a UFO knowledgeable person, and everybody at the barbecue is like, hey, tell us what's going on with the UFOs. You lay out, there could be a couple races. I've heard this, I've heard that, all of this crazy stuff. And everyone's like, okay. No. They're like, oh, that's cool, because now we're in that realm, right? Where this is a possibility. Yeah. But the second you tell them about remote viewing or dino beavers, they're out. Yeah. They're out. And it's just like, wait a second. So you believe 16 species are visiting our planet, but you can't believe in remote viewing, right? It's because they don't understand the concept of it, so it's hard for them to wrap their heads around. But I mean, so what are your final thoughts, Mr. Thomas?
I don't know, man. I think it's an interesting time to be alive.
I agree.
I don't think we're going to get the exact story, but I think we're going to get some level of a version of the story. And honestly, God, I do hope that at some point the world kind of comes together on this issue, that it's not just bipartisan, but the countries themselves start working together. But I get the feeling that's going to be a ways down the road, at least in the beginning. These are the beginning steps.
What do you got?
Can I just say, I know that times are changing, because I have never had to learn about these things. Jamarl, what we should expect should happen with this bill and filling offices. This is not something up until I don't know, this year that I've had to understand the process of related to UFOs. So this is it's a big deal, and this was delightful. So it was really nice to hear your perspective, and I think all of the political experts are going to be so necessary in these coming months for the folks like me who have had my head in the sand.
Well, think about it yourself. 5 years ago, did any of you believe that it would have looked like this in 5 years?
Like, no, not at all.
Would you have ever thought, whoa, they were putting an amendment into the NDAA to study human effects of UFOs?
I definitely didn't think that there would be room to talk about this from a political perspective every day. Yeah. Every day we do a show, and every day we're talking about this in a current context, not a past context. We're talking about things that are happening today. And the thing that I love about it the most, man, and maybe you could sort of speak to this, we are watching political change happen in real time. Like we have a front row seat to this, and I absolutely am geeking out over it. I love it, and talking to someone like you just absolutely amplifies that by 10, dude. Because you go to your channel and you listen to what you cover, and it's like 99.9%. But hey, when every once in a while, when something cool happens, Jamarl Thomas is going to talk about UAP and UFOs, and it's eloquent and it's well thought out. and it's not making fun of anything. It's not, you know, the giggle factor's gone when you talk about it. And that's what I love about you the most is, you know, Kurt Joy Mungle said on our show that, you know, he fears that when this does become a paradigm shifting thing, that the media is going to come in and steal the thunder of everybody who's been talking about this for decades. They're just gonna come in and they're gonna be like, okay, we're here, yay, you know, and they're gonna try and get their ratings. But I think they're gonna hit a wall of, oh, we don't know how to talk about this because we've never done it before. We don't have the personnel because we've been so concentrated on every other aspect of news except for this. And so it's going like, I mean, they just had on Fox News had Jeremy Corbell on this morning, and it was so stupid the questions that he was getting asked. I mean, even the interviewer was like, "Okay, you've told me about your UFO experience and your belief in this," and Jeremy's like, "No, like I've never had an experience, so you've never talked to me about that, and I don't believe this. We have the data, decades of data to show." And not only that, but the Navy's changed their regulations. Right. You know, we have now a Gillibrand amendment that's on the floor that's being voted on. This is actual law. This is not a belief system anymore. This is a tangible thing. So, you know, keep fighting the good fight, dude. And I absolutely love you to death. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for carrying the torch on this from an intellectual standpoint and just and what you do. I can't appreciate you enough. Before you get out of here, please tell everyone where they can find Jamarl Thomas. Oh,
Jamarl Thomas. I'm on Twitter at the Prague Soapbox. My own YouTube channel. That's at Jamarl Thomas. Also, Radio Sputnik. That's Fault Lines 105.5 FM if you're in Washington, D.C. on the radio. So.
Wonderful, my man. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time. I'm sure I'll be calling on you soon to talk about this when some new political things happen because, I mean, dude, you're one of my favorites, absolute favorites.
Thanks,
and if you guys haven't seen Jamarl Thomas's interview of Lou Elizondo, go to his YouTube channel right now. I think it's the best interview with Lou Elizondo that I've seen. Yeah, like for real. Go watch it. All right, my man. Thank you for coming by. We'll see you soon.
Thank you for this. Nice seeing all of you again. Thank you.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. Thank you. All right, you guys. That was fun. As always.
Yeah, man, always a blast.
All right. Well, Rather, do you have anything coming up on Rather Be Squidding YouTube channel this week?
Yeah, nothing imminently, but I'm searching some topics and subscribe to Rather Be Squidding to make sure you're abreast of them when they come out.
Right on. Jade, what about you? Any cool interviews?
Oh man, I've been sitting on some interviews. I've got one with Jason McClellan that I need to get out, but so we'll have a little holiday break. Try to get back to that. People can check out the Skinny Bob breakdown on the YouTube channel now with Dr. Jeff Red, which I didn't realize.
Which is a great show.
Yeah. And also, I don't know, it was my mic was having issues and I was telling you, but the OG of UAP is OG of UAP.
Oh.
The original.
OG.
Which is extra.
Got it. Okay, sorry, Max. I've never seen that hashtag. So
incredible deciphering skills there.
Yeah, great deciphering skills. I mean, like
I was muted when I was trying to fix my mic. I was trying to tell you.
Dude, it took me like years to figure out acronyms like WTF and SMH. Every time somebody put SMH for years, I was like, what the hell does that mean? What does that mean? And
wait, what is SMH again?
Smack my head.
I thought it was shaking my head. Like
shaking my head. Okay, see, I thought it was this. You know, like, oh, come on, dude. But shaking, I mean, see, like, I'm not good with that stuff. So I'm glad you were here. I'm glad you were here to sort of straighten that out. All right, you guys. Well, thank you so much for tuning in, coming aboard, getting weird with us here on another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review, your home for credible news, reviews, and commentary on everything UAP, UFO, science, and emerging tech. Before we get out of here, I want to say thank you to DOS Tapes. Their SoundCloud link is in the description below. Of course, this show will be available on podcasts in about an hour on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. Leave us a rate and review. Goes a very long way. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share the channel channel if you haven't already. We're so close to 5,000 subscribers. I can taste it. So I appreciate all you guys coming strong and sharing the channel. Truly appreciated. Don't forget to check out our merch store. We've also got the Discord link in the description below. I've got the link for every single person here, for Jane, for Rather, for Jamarl Thomas. If you want to go check out their work and support them in however way you can, we highly recommend doing that. Other than that, you guys, speaking of holiday schedules, we have a show tomorrow with Daniel Miller. It's going to be Campbell Moriera. So check that out. No show Wednesday, no show Thursday for the holiday. And then we're back Friday with Sean Rosh, Witness Citizen, on Friday for the KGRA show. So tune in for that. And then we've got some really cool guests that are lining up for December. So again, don't forget to ring that bell. I can't appreciate you guys enough. Stay safe out there. Peace, y'all. I'm going to tell y'all right now, all of these wonderful people would not be here without Patreon supporters like you. If you enjoy credible news, reviews, and commentary on UFOs and UAPs 5 days a week, you want to support this show. What's your name? Marty. Marty, look how easy this is, Marty. Pick up your phone. Boom! You're a Patreon member. I mean, look, it's so easy. You just click the link, which is right here. Just for $1 a month, you can support this show. Just fill out the information and pledge what's comfortable for you. It could be $1, $5, $10, or who knows. Just support.